For city officials, though, James's first visit here was a success, and the king was now off on further adventures. But adventures are often courted by danger. Next time, historiographers travel to Lancaster. Lancaster, a duchy devoid of monarchical rule. Its duke will visit the town's castle in the summer of 1617 as part of a royal progress, 2 years in the planning. For James I had also ruled as sovereign over Scotland for half a century. Despite promises to visit his native homeland every 3 years, James's Jubilee progress would be the first and only time during his English reign that he would venture there. And what a reign it had been.
Here we are then, another day at the office. Even when it snows, we are still in work. Have a look at that. Snow, rain, sunshine, whatever, we are out in all weathers, guaranteed. So yeah, another day of work, hopefully. Let's get cracking.
In the early 17th century, people were wearing face coverings, socially distancing in the street and self-isolating at home. Thank goodness the early 21st century is as backwards with COVID. Or perhaps it is. Yet outbreaks of pestilence were not always national. Cheshire had avoided Cumbria's 1597-98 outbreak that had killed 2,260 in Penrith alone, yet had succumbed to one in 1603-04 that would return in May 1605. Chester's Assembly set to work destroying infected bedding and limiting household numbers to avoid overcrowding. For traders, business could be conducted via plague stones, such as those in Upton-on-Chester and Penrith. Items for purchase would be placed upon one of them and payment upon another. Coins could be left in vinegar for a few minutes before transfer, or else cleansed with water from a local pump. They also cancelled the Michaelmas and Christmas fairs in 1604 to limit crowds and established pest houses outside the city to isolate the sick. Lancashire would not escape, with Clitheroe recording 34 deaths compared to the usual 19 in the year 1611. Whittington Parish Register recorded how,
from the 19th day of December 1616 to the 4th day of November 1617, next ensuing it pleased God to visit this parish of Whittington with dangerous disease or contagious sickness, within which time and space aforesaid there was sick in this said parish about 200.
Carlisle's Bishop Henry Robinson had died in the afternoon of the 19th of June 1616 and was buried by evening. The following year would see another outbreak in Chester, where grass grew a foot high around the cross due to the lack of use. Something of the grisly horrors from this period have been captured in tableau form in some of the UK's heritage attractions, like this one in the Midlands. The historiographers couldn't resist a research trip to Stratford-Upon-Avon. It's the sort of trip that you bring your family on.
What are you doing forward to seeing here?
Me lunch.
This property on 40 Sheep Street is believed to be late 16th or early 17th century, comprising a yeoman's house, barn and courtyard to form the town's only surviving Tudor alleyway, once home to lesser tradesmen and a medieval wool market. Nevertheless, much of the medieval town centre was destroyed by fire, including one in 1614 that affected this building.
Hi, my name is Hannah and welcome to Tudor World Museum in Stratford-Upon-Avon. I am the shop wench. So I welcome visitors into the museum and also our lovely souvenir shop.
Look at that, wow. I found a 17th century bed.
So this is all Tudor, all authentic, and we're unfunded as well, so all admissions and any money that comes into this place goes straight into the preservation of this building to keep it going for future generations.
What's that bit in the middle?
That is, I think that's beef, isn't it?
It's overcooked, isn't it? Anyone fancy a pint? Oh, God. That's a bit dodgy, isn't it?
Side of a ship, that is.
Up the street at number 1 lived vintner Thomas Quincy from 1616 with his wife Judith Shakespeare. Understandably, Stratford is known for its links to Judith's father, William, whose mysterious life and identity continues to spark the imagination today. Yet he didn't always remain in Stratford.
It's believed he actually worked as a teacher for a short time in Lancashire. If you look at the will of John Cottam, a school teacher from Stratford, also with links with Jesuit priests, he mentions in his will about Fulk Gillam and a certain William Shakeshaft to whom he leaves a set of play clothes. Whether or not this is Shakespeare, we don't know, but if it is, tells us a little bit about what he's actually doing as young men.
In 1603, the Lord Chamberlain's men, including Richard Burbage, John Hemmings and William Shakespeare among its troop, was confirmed by James I as the King's Men. However, it was at this time and later in 1610 that the theatre group would suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune when plague once again struck London's citizens. Maybe it's coincidence that this period when theatres closed that Shakespeare stayed in London and began work on his tragedies. In 1619, the King's Men would travel to Carlisle, but alas, without Shakespeare himself, who had died on his own birthday in 1616. For the next 4 years they would be welcomed here, earning up to 30 shillings per performance. When the King's Progress arrived here the following August from Scotland, James would attend a feast and 2 church services, receiving a gold purse and a fancy cup for his troubles. Whereas Carlisle's troubles concerned raids from the border reivers, the King's fears were self-evident in some of Shakespeare's most famous work. There's a reason the Scottish play predominantly features witches. Nowhere was this more evident than in Lancaster in 1612. The assizes at Lancaster Castle were opened on the 17th of August 1612, and 2 days later John and Jane Bulcock, Anne Whittle or Chattox, Catherine Hewitt, Alice Nutter, Anne Redfern and Isabel Roby had been sentenced to death. In addition, a Margaret Pearson was sentenced to be pilloried and then imprisoned. The trial centred around the murders of 10 people by a dozen witches. It ticked every box in a modern supernatural fantasy drama. Animal familiars, ghostly apparitions, suckling demons, transfiguration, bewitchments, and even a coven of witchings of Malkin Tower on Good Friday. Unfortunately, this was no fantasy. Not according to 9-year-old Jeanette Device, upon whose testimony most of these men and women were sent to the gallows, along with her own brother, sister and mother. For these unfortunate souls, the Golden Lion Inn was where they would receive a final drink before being hung up on the moors overlooking the town.
Here we find ourselves at the Judge's Lodgings. It goes up in 1625, built by a man called Thomas Covell, whose memorial you can see there. His claim to fame is he actually was keeper of the castle and he oversaw the Pendle Witch trial.
With texts such as the Malleus Maleficarum or Hammer of Witches, as well as James' own 3-part demonology, it is no surprise that the King's fascination and fear of witches would popularise England's witch hunts in decades to come. There's a reason that Lancashire was viewed with suspicion during these times. And what's more, it was predominantly Catholic. Next time James delves into theology, and the historiographers top up supplies as they prepare themselves as they branch out into school tours.